Good morning, church. How we all doing? Hey, it's been a crazy morning so far. I barely made it out here this morning, and we got people Zooming all over. Friday's normally my day off, and so everyone's back to school. Both my girls who are still at home are Zooming from in the house. Carrie, my wife, is a pre-K teacher at the local elementary school. They're firing up, and she's actually was in the office all week, and then is Zooming from home. So she's on with her class right now as well. So I was scrambling, and I got to be honest with you. Good morning, Jenny. You're sleepy. How are we doing? How we doing, Linda? Good to see you, Leah. So I was just telling the story of how it's a miracle that I'm here right now. I totally forgot. It was just one of those crazy mornings. So my oldest daughter, is a freshman in high school, her first week of high school, Zooming in, but she's on cross country, and they have practice at 6:30 in the morning. So I'm scheduling that, trying to figure out where everyone's going to be Zooming for their classes today. So we take off, get her to practice, pick up one of her friends, get them home just in time to come in and get some things settled and get everyone settled here. And it's like 10 minutes to 9. And I go, oh my goodness. Yes, that's exactly right, Tim. Wait, it's Friday. And the joke is my wife always reminds me. I usually am telling her Thursday night, said, don't let me forget that I have Devos in the morning. Because, like, as I mentioned, Friday is normally my day off. So I kind of go into Thursday is kind of like my Friday. Mentally, I'm kind of whining. It's like, okay, got everything settled for the weekend. Then I always remember, oh, that's right, Friday morning I have Devos. And I'm usually up anyways, but I'm not thinking of having to do anything. So today was the first time I literally totally forgot. And no one reminded me because everyone else is scrambling around doing their thing as well. So anyways, happy to be here with you this morning. Good to see you all. Hope you're doing well. We're going to jump in I'm just going to, over the next few weeks, walk through Ecclesiastes. Most people are familiar with at least the book or have heard about it or have heard several quotes from it, but it's actually a really extremely profound wisdom book that's often neglected or overlooked as a whole. And so it's always pertinent, but maybe no more pertinent than it is in a time like right now when we're in this pandemic and seeing how fragile things are, how frail they are, how temporary they are. And that's kind of the heart of this book in so many ways, is Solomon just being mindful of this concept and all the wisdom and all the things that he pursued in his life. He's reminding us of the vanity of them. And there's two phrases we talked about last week that are so important. One that's used 30 plus times throughout the book, over and over again, this term vanity or fleeting, depending on your translation. And it has this concept of a vapor or uncapturable or uncontrollable. And he's describing how life is just that. It's very fleeting. It's very uncapturable. It's very uncontrollable. Even though we have lots of ways to control or seem to be able to control certain things, we can fool ourselves into that. It's not as common as we often think. The other phrase that's real important to understand, to have a grasp of this book, is this phrase, under the sun. And he uses that all the time. It's really important to understand that what Solomon is saying about fleeting or uncontrollable or uncapturable or meaningless, he uses that term a lot, as meaningless, is he's talking from this perspective of under the sun. And in their time period, they believed the sun revolved around the earth. And so under the sun meant, meaning in our little world, just strictly from the perspective of this world and this life, meaning apart from a spiritual perspective that sees eternity, sees a new heavens and new earth. When you consider all the things that he's going to talk about in this book from strictly the perspective of this life only, they really are fleeting. They really are vanity. They really are meaningless, meaning there's no meaning, there's no ultimate value to them if it's only for this present life. So an incredibly great book just for wisdom in terms of how do you engage people who don't believe in God, and how do you think about this life apart from that. So that's where we're at today. We're going to look at Ecclesiastes 1:12-18. Last week we looked at the big picture going into this idea of these two terms, vanity and under. Today we're going to jump into a section where Solomon's talking about wisdom and its limitations. As valuable as wisdom is, and it's hugely valuable when you have an eternal perspective, it's very limited in some ways when you only have a perspective of under the sun, meaning wisdom in and of itself can really only do so much. It's very limited. It's very fleeting in terms of its value to us. So let me read from 12-18. It says, I, the teacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to examine and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. God has given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun and have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, see how I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly. I learned that this too is a pursuit of the wind. For with much wisdom is much sorrow, and knowledge, as knowledge increases, grief increases. So Solomon's just really saying from a more philosophical perspective that the pursuits of these, if you really stop and think about them, simply from an earthly perspective, the pursuit of wisdom is really quite full of folly, because even what we think we can fix, when he says what is crooked cannot be straightened, what is lacking cannot be counted, he's stating just the limitations of our abilities, that even though we might solve one problem, there's always another one. In fact, there's often 10 more problems right around the corner. We develop a new technology and everyone thinks, oh, this technology, the cell phone or whatever it might be, apps, these are going to just make our lives so much easier and so much simpler. But the funny thing is when we develop these things, there's 10 more problems that surface as a result of them. And we see this in life, in a sense, all the time. We're always trying to pursue something new, something greater in this world. And there's nothing wrong with advancement. That's not what Solomon's talking about. He's going to talk about those things later on. It's not the pursuit of advancement or gaining knowledge or wisdom. It's seeing that that is our ultimate pursuit. When these earthly pursuits become our ultimate pursuit, the reality is it's pure vanity. It doesn't ultimately gain us anything. It just surfaces more and more problems. In fact, I forget if it was Newsweek or who did an article not too long ago that talked about just the comforts and riches and all the things that we have in the 20th century or 21st century now, but 20th century has been the majority of this last century. And yet people in America and people in general are less happy, less satisfied, and less fulfilled than they've ever been. And so we have much, much more than we've ever had. We have more accomplishments, more pursuits than we've ever had, but we have less joy, less satisfaction, less contentment than we've ever had. And what's so fascinating is Solomon wrote about this 3,000 years ago. In fact, that's what was the latter part of his life. As sad as an ending as it was in his life, God used it to communicate wisdom to the rest of us. And Solomon is essentially telling us, hey, don't do what I did. I got to a point where I had all this wisdom, I had all this wealth, I had all these pleasures, I had everything you would think that the world would want you to have. And yet he said it was all vanity. Who better to listen to than supposedly the richest man who ever walked the earth besides Jesus, and the wisest man to ever do so. So here's Solomon teaching us that there's nothing wrong with gaining wisdom, but if wisdom in itself, in an earthly sense, is your ultimate pursuit, it's going to leave you empty. Simply piling up earthly degrees and gaining knowledge here in this world is so temporal, because it's going to really have no value the moment we take our final breath. And so that's the heart of this passage, and it's very good for us now. We can see it even with the solving and the wisdom of all these things of this coronavirus, as scientists are scrambling to come up with a vaccine and figure out all these things, none of which is bad in and of itself. But if we think that that's going to ultimately give us the peace and security that we want, we're gonna be on this constant cycle the rest of our lives, because the moment they figure out a vaccine for this coronavirus, or how to stop it from spreading, or whatever it might be, there's going to be 3 more viruses coming out after that, or some other sickness or disease, or many of the sicknesses and diseases that we've been battling for many, many years, like cancer and heart disease and various things like that, still existing, and they hurt and kill more people than even the coronavirus has. So again, keep in mind what Solomon is talking about is not the fact that pursuing wisdom is wrong. He's talking so much about perspective. This whole book is about perspective. And if we pursue these things with an earthly perspective only, then it's vanity, it's fleeting, because every time we solve one problem, there's going to be 10 problems coming. Every time we gain some earthly wisdom, there's going to be 6 more things that either we need to figure out, or ultimately, once you learn one thing, you realize how much more complex it is than we even thought, and that everything we've been doing really makes no difference at all. So just want to encourage you with that today, that your hope is not in gaining earthly wisdom or any of these other things that we're going to look at here. Your hope is in the person of Jesus Christ, who has all wisdom, who knows all things, and sees things from an eternal perspective that's far beyond just this present life. Meaning, if you don't have all the wisdom, if you're making decisions without all the earthly decisions or all the earthly knowledge you need, it doesn't mean you should just make poor decisions. It just means make the best decision you can with what you have, ultimately putting your hope and trust in God. He will guide you in your way. He'll guide you on your path, and you are not living purely for this life and the wisdom that this world can offer. You have a much greater hope that supersedes anything this world could offer, any wisdom this world could offer. For with much wisdom in this world, Solomon says, is much sorrow. And as knowledge increases, grief increases. And that's played out as we've tried to live according to more and more modern knowledge and more stuff about this world. People have become more and more discouraged, more and more depressed, and more concerned, less content and less joyful or happy in the next world or in Jesus Christ. We begin to rely on ourselves more than we should. So I want to encourage you with that this morning. Keep your eyes upward. Remember where your true hope is. Keep in mind that under the sun in this world, Everything is vanity. Everything you pursue strictly in this world will come to an end and will have no ultimate long game. There's no ultimate meaning for it. But the things you pursue uh, with a heavenly perspective, the way you love others, the way you use these vapored, uncontrollable, fleeting things in this world to sow eternal seeds of love will last forever. So encourage you with that. Keep that perspective in mind. That's wisdom that's going to help you not only in this world, but in the one to come. So love you all, Austin Oaks. Good to be with you this morning. We'll continue in Ecclesiastes next Friday. And I hope to see you again then. Have a wonderful weekend.